not build muscle in the gym. You build muscle in bed, right? So make sure you're sleeping. That is where you build muscle. The stimulus for the muscle comes in the gym. So you need both. You need your gym and you need your bed. Allow enough time for your muscle to recover and make sure you're not constantly sore. If you've been sore for 4 weeks straight, then you're overtraining. Simple as. Make sure you allow time for recovery. So you have that high intensity peak and then you have the very low intensity recovery. Okay, welcome to episode 17 of the Kayvman Show. Today we're discussing resistance training. Last week we discussed sprinting, which I think is probably the first and most important element of training. And the second most important element of training for me would be resistance training. We're going to answer a few questions. What is resistance training? Why should we do it? And what the best form of it is. So first off, what is resistance training? It's actually kind of hard to define because the most quintessential form of resistance training is weight training with an external force, but it would also include calisthenics or body weight training. It's your own body weight. It also includes bands. You could do it in a pool, or you could do it against a partner. I would say technically wrestling would be resistance training because you're working against a partner. So it's anytime you're working against some type of force that essentially forces your body to work harder by using some of force that you're working against. That's what resistance training is. And you're doing it with a view to improve your either body composition or your athletic performance. So that's defining what resistance training is. And the various forms there are probably infinite forms, and there's always forms coming out. It doesn't have to be, free weights. It could be machines. It could be, they have all types of things like sandbags now and an infinite form of it. They're all beneficial. You want to do resistance training primarily because it stimulates muscle growth. Muscle growth is important not only for looking good and burning fat, and we just like the look of muscle on men and women. To some extent, men find athletic looking women to be desirable. There's a point where skinniness is not attractive to men. And likewise, there is, of course, women like muscular men. They don't like overly muscular men, generally speaking. I think we've spoken about this before. But so suffice to say, there is an aesthetic component to it, but there's also something much deeper than pure vanity. Resistance training will build muscle, and muscle is super important for just activities of daily living. You are much healthier with muscle on your frame. Some people argue that muscle is an organ and it's a super important organ. It's definitely very important for your aging. You're going to age a lot slower, age a lot better with muscle on your frame. One of the leading causes of mortality in elderly people is muscle atrophy. That can lead to things like, if you slip and fall and break your hip, if you don't have muscle, you could very well die, and people do all the time. So muscle atrophy is a leading cause of mortality in the elderly too. So if you're needing reasons for you to build muscle, aside from the aesthetic goal of just looking better, which for me is enough, you want to look good, but if you need more reasons, there are many other ones. Health and longevity is a pretty good one. Also energy, having muscle on your frame makes life easier because you're stronger. So you're going to have more energy. And also the mental component too. If your body is healthy and has a good amount of muscle on it, no doubt that your body will function better. Your brain will function better too. So there are infinite reasons to build muscle. Resistance training is the best form of building muscle, whether that's calisthenics, which I recommend to do when you're starting out resistance training. I think you need to have a foundation of calisthenics. And then on top of that, I would start lifting external weights. Now, that could come in the form of free weights, barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, or it could come in the form of machines. I don't really care, to be honest with you. A lot has been made of how free weights is better for you than machine, because they have a more functional component, because they move in a free way. There's a more functional component. I think resistance, if you want to stay athletic, you can use machines just fine. And sometimes it's better because you don't need a spotter for a machine, Whereas if you're using free weights and you're going super heavy on, say, bench press or squat, you're probably going to need a spotter because of just safety. So machines can be fantastic. They move in a very linear and relatively robotic fashion, but that can be of benefit when you're lifting super heavy weights too. Don't worry about it. If you only have access to machines, or you prefer machines, or you feel more confident on a machine because you know exactly what to do on a machine versus free weights, which are a little bit more complex and take a little bit more nous, that's fine too. If you're more advanced and know how to use barbells, kettlebells, and dumbbells, there are things that you can do with barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells that you couldn't come close to doing with a machine too. So both have their benefits. Speed, you can lift a barbell or dumbbell or kettlebell with a lot more speed a lot of times than a machine. If you're training to increase your speed with resistance training, free weights might be better for you. And if you're worried about losing your athletic prowess by lifting too much weights and becoming too bulky, that's generally not going to happen. You don't need to worry about that. Almost every athlete I know, in every sport I know, if you consider them an athlete, even golf, they lift weights. And there's a few reasons for that. Why everyone lifts weights, why everyone does resistance component training, even though the old school mentality used to be that resistance training and muscle building makes you slow and bulky and all that type of stuff. And now we know that not to be true. I said this last time, but I was looking at an NFL linebacker and he was just huge, built like a bodybuilder and so fast and powerful. So you don't need to worry about losing your athleticism by resistance training. Some people won't care, but for me, I used to, because I always wanted to be able to move. I would hold back with my resistance training because I was worried that I would get slow and bulky. The reason people get slow with resistance training is probably because they're overtraining and they're beating the muscle down and they are lowering muscle quality by essentially destroying their body with resistance training. So you do have to be careful with resistance training to make sure that you're actually recovering. If you're constantly sore from resistance training, you're probably not adapting. You shouldn't constantly be sore. When you try a new workout, when you try a new exercise or a new workout, or you're doing things in a new way, then it's fine to be sore. In fact, you should be sore, but you shouldn't be sore per body part more than once a month. You should be sore more than once every, let's say, 3 months. With regard to soreness from resistance training, because that's the primary way that you're going to get sore, you should be sore every once in a while. You shouldn't be sore constantly. Okay, so that's the best way to do resistance training. The portion of resistance training that tears those muscle fibers and rebuilds them, because that's the way that you build muscle, is you essentially put it under stress, tear the muscle fiber down, and then you allow it to rebuild and recover. And then it will, generally speaking, get stronger. It will build bigger, stronger, denser to adapt to the stress that you put it under in the first place. And that's generally the eccentric components, usually the negative components. If you're lifting a weight up, it's actually the weight down that is going to put the most eccentric force and probably build the most muscle for most exercises. So make sure that you're lifting the weight up, but really control the weight down. Control the full rep. That's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is losing control when they're resistance training. You have to make sure that you have both the power element and the control element if you want to build muscle. There are infinite forms. You can see people who do purely bodyweight training and they build massive amounts of muscle, gymnasts, etc. So calisthenics and bodyweight can be a great way of building muscle, particularly for your upper body. In fact, I would say most people don't actually need to lift weights for their upper body. Your lower body will need more stress, probably more stress than your body weight, to build muscle alone. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do bodyweight training for your lower body, but I wouldn't expect too much muscle gain if you're only doing calisthenics. I would recommend an actual external weight that exceeds your body weight for your lower body. For your upper body, most people will do fine with pull-ups, dips, push-ups. If you get really deep into calisthenics, you probably don't need external weights to build your upper body. If you look at, some of the higher level calisthenics guys and girls and gymnasts, you'll see a massive amount of muscle in the upper body. So that is what resistance training is, why you should do it, because it's the best form of building muscle, and the various forms that you can do for it. I'd like to wrap it up and touch on a principle we've spoken about before, which is intensity. and recovery. The way you're going to build muscle is you're going to stress it in a way that you have not stressed it before, generally speaking, harder, right? Going harder, having more intensity to your workout than you did previously, and then allowing it to recover. I see people making one of these two mistakes all the time. Either they're training super hard, they have the intensity, but they're going into the gym every single day and they're overtraining in that regard, where they're not allowing their muscle to recover. You need recovery to build muscle. You do not build muscle in the gym. You build muscle in bed, right? So make sure you're sleeping. That is where you build muscle. The stimulus for the muscle comes in the gym. So you need both. You need your gym and you need your bed. Allow enough time for your muscle to recover and make sure you're not constantly sore. If you've been sore for 4 weeks straight, then you're overtraining. Simple as. Make sure you allow time for recovery. So you have that high intensity peak and then you have the very low intensity recovery. That's crucial. Doing it long enough, you won't see any results from a 2-week training program. You need at least 4, 8, 12-week training program to really see the effects of muscle building. There's making sure you have good nutrition as well, but making sure that you have super high intensity and then you allow yourself the time to recover, and keeping your workouts short. Don't hold something in the tank for a 1-hour workout and then when you do that, coast through the whole thing because you know, oh, I have 25 sets to do today, so I can't push on this any one particular set. You need to it's really the one set of highest intensity that's going to build your muscle. So as a take home, when you're doing your resistance training, if you're trying to build muscle and get stronger, the most important thing is that one high intensity set done to 100% of your effort. That is what is going to build muscle. If you can only do one set of full intensity, then only do one set per body part. Don't feel the need to do 20 sets. What's important is you hit that super high intensity that you've never done before, and then you allow yourself time to recover. And the next time you come to the gym, you go higher than that high intensity. So you're essentially constantly doing personal bests. And that's the way to build resistance training. So to wrap up, number 1, resistance training is just pushing against some type of force that makes life difficult for your body and forces it to adapt and recover. Number 2, what are the best forms of resistance training? I would say for your upper body, you probably want to make sure you at least have a foundation to build off with calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups, dips. And then you can add weight training if you want, but make sure your pull-ups, push-ups, and dips are solid before going crazy with the weight training. And then for lower body, it's important to use an external force, i.e. Free weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, or machines. Doesn't really matter. Those are the best forms of resistance training. Bear in mind that the way to build muscle is to have this intensity recovery cycle. So as high as you can intensity in the workout and keep those workouts pretty short, an hour or less. And then you have plenty of time to recover. Make sure you have rest days built into your training regime. Make sure that you're sleeping enough. Make sure you're drinking enough water, meditate, etc. All of that stuff is really good stuff, and it really does make a big difference. But yeah, go hard in the gym and then go home and chill. All right, let me know how that goes. Peace.